Yeah, let's get started. Okay, Mike, you want I get some information from you on how to come up with this funds?
Okay, I want to start there. Okay. Just a couple of, there are a few ways of coming up with the funds, and the first question is determine how much funds we're actually going to need. Now, when I say that, I've basically done my numbers based on $5 million. However, there is approximately $1 million left in the old bonds, for which there are still maybe some expenses that are required to be paid out of that, and therefore the exact amount that's going to be left over, we still don't know that. The second thing we don't know is we don't know if we could use any of those funds towards this particular project. So making the assumption for now that that we cannot in any way, shape, or form use those funds, we then have to determine how long out do we want to go if we were to borrow $5 million. Now, there are many ways to do that. One way is, again, those same serial bonds that we are out there 30 years on the old sewer. The second method would be to do a serial bond for less than 30 years, which it could be 15 years, could be 20 years, 30 years, etc. Or the third option, which is one that I think you might want to consider, or at least study a little further, is a series of BANs. Now you're going to say, how can we pay off $5 million using BANs? If we structure the payments properly, and if we are capable of paying the payments over 3 fiscal years, if we could use that as a basis, then we can conceivably pay back the bonds over a 7-year period. A BAN, as you know, is a 5-year payback, but if you pay over a 3-year period, you basically have 7 years to pay the whole thing back. Now, there are 3 different ways for which we can pay these things back. One is to add to the fees that are already on the sewer. Now, if I may digress a moment, and after the next 2 parts, I'll explain what we mean by that. The second is that we could place this bond, this BAN, if we went that way, or the serial bonds, on the real estate taxes as a separate line. Or third, we can put the taxes on the land so that everybody participates regardless of whether they have an improvement on it or not. So we have 3 options. Now let me tell you what we have now, and one of the studies that you've asked me to do in the past, which I'm pretty complete with, but I'll just give you a quick background on it. Right now, each unit in the village is paying approximately $280 a year for the sewer fee. It's $70 a quarter plus water, $70 a quarter or $280 a year. However, if you recall, I had mentioned at the last meeting that those sewer bonds are not being fully paid by the fees. So in order for those sewer bonds to be paid by the fees, we would have to increase that sewer fee by approximately $30 a quarter to make it from 70 to 100. Now, before you get so excited, obviously then we would reduce a certain amount of money from the operation payment, the use of the water.
Sewer.
For the sewer. It would not necessarily be dollar for dollar because the sewer is in basically deficit spending. We owe the general fund approximately $500,000 that we borrowed from it. And we do have an unknown receivable from the town that still is being negotiated.
That $30 takes into account?
The $30 takes into account none of the town. Takes $30 does not take into account the payback of the $500,000. The $30 a quarter simply matches the fee that we're collecting, the assessments that we're collecting, and the bond payments that we're paying out. I have a whole set of exhibits here which I can hand out and we can go through, but you wanted to talk about the bond first, and then I'll come back to all this. So if we were going to do the bond on an assessment basis, then we would have to increase that assessment depending on the method that we choose. So if we did a 15-year serial bond, and I'm guessing at a 6% interest rate, it could be 4, it could be 5. The other bonds we're paying between 5.5 and 5.7. It's hard to say what that final number would be. I use 6%, thinking that it would never be higher than that, although you can never predict the future anymore. That would increase our assessment by $145 a year. If we would do a 20-year serial bond...
A year or a quarter?
A year. That would be over 15 years. And I have all this to hand out to you. And for a 20-year, we'd have $131 a year. 30-year would be $103. And if we did a BAN over 7 years, it would be $223 a year for assessment. However, the big difference with the BAN, it's paid over 7 years, not 30, 20, or 15. So that's kind of a decision that we might have to come to.
Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt. Those numbers, that's if the amount of users that we have stays constant over all those years,
right.
Correct?
The amount of users we have now is approximately 1,600 actual units, 3,500 actual units that are paid, because many buildings are multi-user. So yes, if you increase the number of units, that number will go down, and of course that can be adjusted each year. It's not fixed.
And if we were to put more of the burden on the assessments as opposed to the rates, how would that be impacted by the manner in which we charge the town? Because that is just one lump sum, it's not two separate amounts.
Well, I don't want to, I'm a little nervous about talking about how we would charge the town while you guys are in the middle of litigation.
Well, of course.
But obviously you could then do a straight fee with the town, you could do a by unit, you could do by use, you can, I mean, there's many ways to then charge the town users.
Mike, and I assume then, if I understand you correctly, this assumes no money from the town.
This assumes no money from the town. Let me read it. It assumes $60,000 from the town. Basically, I just took 60 out of the air, which is approximately what I thought they would be paying for the fee. Some money from the town has to be allocated to the bond. Whether we charge the town or whether we simply allocate money from the town towards it. I use $60,000 a year in order to get that gap into the 120, and I'm going to hand this out to you in a minute so you can look at the pages. If we did a straight evaluation on the taxes would be $1.40 for 15 years, $1.27 for 20, $99 for 30, and $2.16 for 7 years on the BAN. If we did the land tax, basically those costs would be very similar to the fees, the assessment. So let me give these out to you, if you don't mind. And we're looking at Exhibit 8, 9, and 10, the last three. On Exhibit 8, on Exhibit 8,